This is Listening with Franklin Livingston, and our guest is DG.
So you were talking about start from there that these nuns were very conservative.
Yes. Yeah, and it's something for me. I find it funny and hypocritical that the nuns were ultra conservative, so much so that you could not really wear anything above the knees. So I happen to be like a member of the drum and bugle corps, like twisting the baton and everything. And among the schools, we were the only one, since it's a drum and bugle corps. You gotta have a little bit of flesh. Things. And oh my god, the maximum that we can do is to like just show our knees. While the other schools were like almost showing their underwear already. And I'm like, I would laugh it off. And I really felt stupid because my knees happen to be dark, with scars from like running, playing around and everything. Those are nubby knees, and they're very hideous in my opinion. So I was like feeling embarrassed when we were like marching and everything, and we were like just showing, well, like in my case, my nubby hideous knees. So yes, and then there was also one time when I was running for like election in the school. When you have the presidency, blah blah blah. I was performing on stage, and then the nun went up to stop it because she found it like vulgar or something when I was not really doing anything. And yeah, so for me, it's yeah, I don't. I wish that they're not that conservative, so much so that it stunts your growth sometimes, especially if you're like an artist. If you're not doing anything malicious or what, I think that they should like encourage you to do that and not like stunt it in any way, shape, or form. So yes.
But in apart from all this, what should we wear? Were they also concerned about the character building? Did they ever talk about how to be a good human being, how to be a good, in your case, girl, how to make wise choices?
Oh yes, yeah. Of course, since you're Christian and everything, they would always, and as a woman, they would always, girl at that time, they would always encourage you to not have like sex before marriage. So no premarital sex and everything. So very no PDAs for like lovers. They're kind of frowned upon. So, but like character building, yes, of course, like the virtue of like patience and everything. So that I practice that, especially with how do you call this, with the immigration, like how long it took for my father to petition us. And yeah, I also saw that in my father because he was petitioned by his siblings, and it took more than 2 decades for sibling petition takes that long. So yes, a
So
lot
the
of
patience came from the Catholic upbringing.
yes, and that's why. Just because we're touching on the immigration, I really, although I feel for those, this is my personal view, okay? I feel for those being deported. However, we also waited a long time and it caused like a lot of family separation. So it would be unfair for us, like having had to pay a lot and wait a lot, all the sacrifices that my family did, if it would be, you have that impunity, and then what about us? So yes. And what else? So I think those virtues. And one thing that actually caught my attention here in the United States as compared to the Philippines. Say, for example, if you take like a public kid, like a bus, for example, and there's no seat. So your mom, there's only one seat, and it's you and your mom. So your mom or your whoever, older relative or older friend, would take the seat and then have you sit on the lap like a small, if you were like small. But over here, it's opposite. It's actually the seat being offered to the child, and then the mom
Will
stands.
stand. Yes.
So I think this is just my view. Again, I stand corrected in anything that I say in this podcast, but and I'm just expressing my views. However, because I see like kids now, if you're always like trying to baby the kid, like giving preference to the kid, then they would find more reason to be like difficult to manage or to discipline. That is just in my thoughts. So if I were a parent, I would do like the Asian does, like in at least in the Philippines. I would be sitting, and then my child would be seated on my lap. And yeah, so there's a lot of like control. You need to control. You need to be tactful. That's how we were like brought up, and we're like sensitive. Asians are not like Americans. In the Philippines, there's a lot of non-verbal communication. Like you'll try to see if the other one is offended, or and before you even talk, you got to think about it.
At home or in general in the
At home,
society?
no, at home at least, and no. It's actually the whole country. So we're people pleasers, which is bad in some ways, but like if you are in a relationship, like friendship or anything, you try to be sensitive to the other's needs. Like you tend to like anticipate what they could need or they would need, and try to avoid things that could potentially offend or hurt them.
So let's say instead of calling it, this is my view, calling it being people pleasers, what
Mhm.
if we call it being considerate, being polite,
Yes, yeah.
being sensitive, as you said,
Yes.
being cautious,
Mhm.
right? Because that becomes an issue. For example, this is my experiences speaking. Sometimes someone would say a word or a phrase to someone, as you mentioned, a friend or a
Mhm.
colleague or in relationship, that will stick with them throughout their life and might keep on hurting them, might
Mhm.
keep on making them feel rejected or depressed,
Mhm.
and they might not share it, they might not find a closure throughout their life.
Mhm.
So that's why there's a wisdom there. Uh, I think when we say I'm being honest, a lot of times it's not being honest, it's being sharing your perspective. And even I've seen this, like when you say this phrase, and I see that in some settings, people would say, I'm going to disagree with you, or I disagree with you,
Mhm.
right? Instead of saying that, it's the same thing when you let's say you're writing something
Mhm.
and you use a lot of this language. However, comma,
Mhm.
da 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 da, or nonetheless,
Mhm.
or
That's so formal now. I don't think that I hear a
so
lot of.
no informal setting because let's say healthcare research paper.
Yes.
You
Yeah,
mentioned
yeah.
you worked in healthcare previously. I did
Yes. Yeah.
not. So
Mhm.
uh, instead of just adding that word,
Mhm.
that what's the reason of that word? Because you're just stating your point. You can say that. Same
Mhm.
thing. Why you're saying I'm gonna agree, disagree with you, and then you state your point. Just state your point, and we have two opinions to decide from. Likewise, when we use certain terms,
Mhm.
that could be very traumatic to some people,
Mhm.
right? And being considerate and not using those terms. There are certain words we don't use that were common, say, 40 years ago,
Mhm.
60 years ago. And I think it's better to be that way. So that's why I'm just trying to say that I wouldn't call that people pleaser because I just think whenever I travel to, I usually haven't been to the Philippines yet, but I don't have a fear there. And I know just why. Because I don't fear of being attacked emotionally.
Mhm.
I don't fear being attacked psychologically. or physically, right?
Mhm.
And in an environment where you have a fear of being attacked,
Mhm.
which is very common. A lot of times people can't be themselves in our uh, surroundings. And because we have a constant, and I think the modern term is being judged, right? Everybody judges everybody. They might not use that concept because everyone has a perception about someone. What did I say early on? I said, if you didn't tell me you were from the Philippines, I might have assumed you were from the South to Latin America,
Mhm.
right?
Yes. Yeah.
It's judging. That's the
Mhm.
perception. Judgment is not a negative word, but it has been used negatively in our culture
Mhm.
these days, right? So we can say, yeah, perception, assessment,
Mhm.
discernment, conclusion, but the concept is still there. So if there's a concept that makes people uncomfortable, I think it's wiser to just avoid that or use a different term, not concept, sorry, terminology, I meant to say.
Mhm.
So it's great that Asians are more considerate and sensitive.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah. But if I can share with you, with regards to like the painful words, yes. So I've had that experience from a relative, which really had a deep impact on me. However, when she asked for forgiveness, like, hey, it was just, because sometimes, out of like our anger, hormones, and everything, you could utter words that you would regret later on. So that was the thing that happened. And when she asked for forgiveness, all my hurt actually were gone. So just to let you know that it is possible that sometimes we blurt out the words that we don't really intend
Yeah.
to say. However, when you say also sorry in a very sincere way and you feel that there's redemption to that.
Yeah. And that's what I was going to say early on when we were talking about people say, sorry about that, and
Mhm.
hitting you and passing by. You sense we humans are not that stupid as I don't know what it is, the system or the norms as it has made us or
Mhm.
pretends us for us to be like that. But
Mhm.
humans are very intuitive,
Mhm.
right? And especially females. Women have they are better in emotional intelligence. That's what I have
Yeah,
heard always. Like, yeah,
I believe so.
yeah, I mean, the culture, the mainline culture might not agree, or certain men might not agree with that. But women, like, for example, whenever I have had tons of female friends and relatives, and they would, I would just, I would listen and they would just tell me, oh, yeah, I didn't, get good vibes from
Mhm.
someone. I don't think men has that kind of discernment.
Intuitive and the gut feel and
Yeah, women are better at
everything.
it. And the same thing when it
This,
comes to the detail, being detail oriented, women are better than
oh,
men.
really? Well, engineers are also very detail oriented because I'm not. I cannot be like a policeman because even if I go into this room like 10 times, I wouldn't really see the details. But some people, like if you have like a friend who's like a police officer, they can
Yeah,
really
they are trained
get,
differently,
yeah.
but so say your profession, right?
Hmm.
Uh, a man doing the same thing versus a female doing the
Hmm.
same thing. And usually it's different. And because I have seen a lot of healthcare professionals within the healthcare
Hmm.
settings, right? And yeah. But let's go back to your childhood.
So yeah, I was gonna tell you back to the topic of like people pleasers. Well, there's some truth in it. Like us Filipinos are what's this, people pleasers, because like me before, as I was growing up, because you were trained to like just keep whatever you feel most to yourself and not really be expressive about it. So you could be a people pleaser because even if it's already offending you, or even if it's not to your best interest, you just shut your mouth because you want to please the other person. And that also happens like among my colleagues. Like if you're Filipino, we're usually not very confrontational or argumentative with the boss. You don't question it. So I believe there's some truth in the people pleaser thing, because instead of like questioning, hey, like that, you try to avoid those kinds of rips. So
I think in the working environment,
Mhm.
everyone who wants to continue having a job, it doesn't matter he or she's a Filipino.
Yes, but mostly, yeah,
or-
we try to avoid displeasing the higher ups.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just yesterday I saw the headlines and
Mhm.
President Donald Trump's cabinet, right? He's sitting in the middle, and then his secretaries on the side, and they're all sitting with very serious face like this. So they might call it a respect.
Mm-hmm.
You might call it pleasing,
Mm-hmm.
but I think in general, so I have worked in different organizations.
Mm-hmm.
People who are not pleasing, using your word,
Mm-hmm.
their bosses and questioning them, which
Mhm.
I was always a bad guy,
Mm-hmm.
they don't last longer.
Yeah. Normally, yeah, you don't want to
So I
have
was,
someone
like
contradicting you
I,
a lot.
I remember my last full time position. I was transferred after 2 years, and after first year, it was very difficult for both of us, to my senior and myself, to work in the same setting, because I questioned a lot of decisions or
Mhm.
policies and all that,
Mhm.
instead of just saying yes, sir. Right?
Oh, well.
And that's in every. And the guy probably who came after me, and I think I might be the only person of color within at least 10 years.
Mhm.
And there were a lot of people who came and went. And if you want to use that term, people pleaser, yes.
Mhm.
I was thinking more like, and they might use different words like submissions, and oh, you got to
Yeah,
submit to
of
the
course.
authority,
Yeah.
and
Insubordination.
subordination,
Yes.
exactly, and loyalty. The people even would go in this direction of loyalty. Oh, are you loyal to the system?
Oh my
or
gosh, not
organization, to the,
Not
because
blindly though.
when the
There's
boss is mad,
Uh-huh.
and in this case, male,
Mhm.
so he's going to say, you are not loyal to her.
Oh, that's
You are the bad guy. You don't understand. What do we
Oh.
want? And you need to be kicked out of the system. So I think a lot of people, they work, like I know people, for example, there was a gentleman, I don't understand how this thing is
Mhm.
in the bone worlds, orthopedic.
Mhm.
So in Illinois, in a hospital, there's a guy, I think he's not a nurse, he's not a doctor, somewhere in the middle,
Mhm.
but he deals with people's bones,
Mhm.
right? Now, this guy had 5 children,
Okay.
and he had 2 daughters, 3 boys. All 3 boys were mentally challenged.
Mhm.
He had a house in the middle of Chicago City. He had a wife who I think then was staying home because these guys were getting older, and he had 2 vehicles,
Yes.
insurances, and all that
Mhm.
stuff. He was the only breadwinner,
Okay.
right? For that kind of person, I think his policy was not to run into any conflict.
He has already so much what's this things going on.
Responsibility,
Yeah.
So in that, and a lot of people are like that. It's not about being a healthcare professional. There might be somebody who might have worked for 20, 25 years as a
Mhm.
waiter or as a salesman. Or I remember back a long time ago, I used to work at Sam's Club in the Midwest,
Mhm.
night shift.
Mhm.
Because if you do night shifts, I think they used to pay $1 extra per hour or 50 cents, I forgot.
Of course.
And the
yeah.
guy who trained me, who was my boss or
Okay.
senior, whatever term you want to use, he was an African guy.
All right.
He had an African accent.
Mhm.
He had a PhD. His PhD was done, some sort of scientist PhD, not tech type, botany or something. PhD was done at one of the finest institutions here in the US. And he said, because of my speech, I don't get to find a reasonable job. But with this, because Sam's Club is of Walmart, and the salaries were the same. And he said, with this job, I was able to raise 3 kids, and his daughter was about to get to, I think, at that point in Northwestern University, right? So that kind of guy. Now, the senior guy, the real supervisor, was a little different. So they will overlook, or they will overhear, or they will let go of some of the things that might annoy them, hurt them. Why? Because they are focused on a bigger goal, which is to raise their children. And he had an idea, and things have changed in the past, I think, 12, 15 years, but his idea was he might not get a white-collar job because he was told that his accent is difficult to be understood, which is, I mean, it doesn't really make sense to me because
that is sad.
That is sad. And you and I had that conversation too about the television.
Because unfortunately, that's the reality here. However, if I were him, I would have tried to probably venture out somewhere else.
Somewhere, because here's the thing, let me add, and this is not about him. I heard a different story from someone else. The other guy, a different story, total different story. Now, the way he was understanding his life at that stage, he said, if I were to leave a town, I was already living in my school, my children were going to school, and I had already bought insurance for 6 months, right? Because then the premium is less and all that. I need to have at least 6 months food or other resources taken care of before moving to a city where I might have a chance, because you move to that city and you find out you don't get a job there too. Unless there's a publication, not publication, there's an advertisement, you respond to that, and sometimes things don't work out in people's favors.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's just like the world is not an easy place to be.
That's true. Yes.
Right.
But although alternatively, he could apply and wait for an application to be approved before making any.
If he had a yes.
Yes. Yeah.
But then also let me add my experience in Illinois. In this country, there are more PhDs in every department than the jobs.
Oh, I didn't know. Wow, that sucks.
And especially if you are not from some sort of IT or a particular kind of electronic scientific background, then I totally forgot. The ratio was maybe 1,000 applicants for one position. I totally forgot that. But the number is so high.
Wow,
People
very
that
competitive.
PhDs and
Wow.
and then when you get into say you teach. See, you teaching, you're going to get to be taught, if you're really new, maybe a J term or a summer term, right? Then you're on your own. And next thing you know, okay, this guy, Dr. So-and-so with a PhD is working at McDonald's, flipping burgers, right? And then if you get assistant professorship, you have to write a book and publish it within a certain period of time in order for you to get it continued or have an associate professorship.
Wow, that's a very tall requirement.
Yes, the journey is not easy. Because there was a time I was considering PhD, and thank God I did not do that.
And the expenses that come.
Oh
with
my
it.
God,
The student
loans.
We piled up
Oh,
years,
yeah.
with all the interest. That is crazy.